5 nighttime habits that could kill adults over 60. What you do in the 2 hours before bed determines what your heart and brain go through for the next 8 hours. This is not about genetics. It is not about bad luck. It is about ordinary habits so familiar you would never suspect them of being dangerous. According to the American Heart Association, nearly half of all fatal cardiac events in adults over 60 occur between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, while you are lying still, while your family sleeps peacefully in the next room. Sleep is not passive rest. Most people assume the heart rests when the body does. The truth is the opposite. When the body follows its natural biological cycle, sleep is the most powerful form of cardiovascular protection it has. Blood pressure drops, heart rate slows, the brain flushes out toxic waste that built up during waking hours. But when certain habits disrupt this cycle, the consequences go far beyond poor sleep. Blood pressure spikes instead of falling. Blood vessels tighten instead of relaxing. Blood thickens instead of flowing freely. In a body over 60, where arteries are already stiffer and the heart already works harder, that kind of physiological disruption can turn fatal within hours. Habit number 5. Eating a heavy meal close to bedtime. When you eat a large meal shortly before lying down, your digestive system demands a sudden surge of blood flow. Your stomach, intestines, and liver all require increased circulation to process what you just consumed. Your heart pumps harder and faster at the exact moment it is biologically programmed to slow down. Blood pressure rises when it is supposed to fall. There is another danger that rarely makes the headlines. Late eating worsens acid reflux in older adults, and nighttime acid reflux is not just uncomfortable. It can stimulate the vagus nerve and trigger irregular heart rhythms that are far more likely to become life-threatening in an aging heart. The adjustment is straightforward. Eat your last meal at least 3 hours before sleep. Keep portions modest and avoid anything heavy or fried. Habit number 4. Going to bed mildly dehydrated. After age 60, the sensation of thirst becomes significantly weaker. You can be clinically dehydrated and feel almost nothing. Many older adults also deliberately cut back on fluids in the evening to avoid waking up for the bathroom at night. The logic sounds reasonable. The medical reality it conceals is not. When the body is dehydrated, blood becomes thicker and more viscous. Thick blood moves more slowly through vessels, and slow-moving blood forms clots more easily. Combine that with the natural reduction in circulation that happens during sleep, and you have created ideal conditions for a clot to form and travel to the heart or brain. Research published in the Journal of Cardiovascular Disease found that even mild dehydration raised the risk of nighttime cardiovascular events by more than 60% in adults over 55. From something as simple as not drinking enough water. The fix is simple. Drink a full glass of water 1 to 2 hours before bed. Use the bathroom right before lying down. Keep a small glass of water on your nightstand. One bathroom trip in the night is a far better outcome than a stroke. Habit number 3. Undiagnosed sleep apnea. This may be the most dangerous silent threat on this list. Sleep apnea is a condition where the airway partially or fully collapses during sleep, causing breathing to stop, sometimes for 10 seconds, sometimes for 30, sometimes longer. In severe cases, this happens hundreds of times per night. Each time breathing stops, oxygen levels in the blood plummet. Each time oxygen drops, the brain triggers an emergency response. Stress hormones flood the body. Heart rate spikes. Blood pressure surges. Then breathing resumes, oxygen returns, and the entire cycle begins again, over and over, while you believe you are sleeping peacefully. Research from Johns Hopkins University found that untreated sleep apnea triples the risk of nighttime heart attacks and quadruples the risk of strokes. And studies published in the Journal of the American Medical Association estimate that more than 80% of moderate to severe sleep apnea cases in adults over 60 are never diagnosed at all. Signs to watch for include loud chronic snoring, waking up gasping or choking, morning headaches, extreme daytime fatigue, regardless of how much you sleep, and blood pressure that remains difficult to control, even with medication. If you recognize any of these signs, ask your doctor about a sleep study. This is not optional. This is urgent. Habit number 2. Taking blood pressure medication at the wrong time or skipping doses. Blood pressure follows a precise 24-hour rhythm. In the early morning hours between 3 and 6 a.m., the body prepares to wake. Cortisol rises, heart rate increases, and blood pressure climbs sharply. In a person whose medication has worn off overnight, this morning surge can be catastrophic. Plaques inside arteries rupture under the pressure. Clots form. Heart attacks and strokes happen in the quietest hours of the day. Research published in The Lancet and confirmed across multiple large clinical trials found that taking blood pressure medication in the evening, rather than the morning, reduced the risk of cardiovascular events during sleep by nearly 45%. And yet most prescriptions are still written as once daily in the morning, simply because it is the default. Do not change your medication routine without speaking to your doctor. But do have that conversation. Ask specifically whether bedtime dosing might offer you better protection overnight. And in the meantime, never skip a dose. Never assume that feeling fine means your blood pressure is fine. It may be surging to dangerous levels in the early hours of the morning, while you sleep completely unaware. Habit number 1. Sleeping in a room that is too warm or too cold. This one sounds almost too simple to be deadly. The science behind it is not simple at all. When a bedroom is too warm, above 22 degrees Celsius, the body spends the entire night working to release excess heat. Blood vessels in the skin dilate, heart rate stays elevated, instead of dropping into its protective nighttime rhythm. You sweat, losing fluids and further thickening your blood. Sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented, robbing the cardiovascular system of the deep restorative stages it needs. Blood pressure never achieves its natural nighttime dip. Research from Harvard Medical School and data published in the European Heart Journal both identified elevated sleeping temperatures as an independent risk factor for nighttime cardiovascular events, particularly in adults over 60. But sleeping in a room that is too cold is equally dangerous. Below 15 degrees Celsius, blood vessels constrict sharply, forcing the heart to pump against significantly higher resistance. In arteries already stiffened by decades of use, that constriction can crack a plaque and trigger a heart attack within hours. The optimal range that allows heart rate to drop naturally, blood pressure to dip as it should, and sleep to reach its deepest restorative phases is between 18 and 20 degrees Celsius. This is not about personal comfort. This is cardiovascular physiology. A protective nighttime routine starting tonight. Research suggests that consistently following a structured pre-sleep routine can reduce the risk of a nighttime cardiovascular event by more than 40%. At 6:30 in the evening, eat your last meal of the day. Keep it light, lean protein and vegetables, nothing heavy or fried, and nothing to eat after that point. At 8 p.m., drink a full glass of water and take any prescribed medications exactly as your doctor has directed. Set a phone alarm so you never miss a dose. At 9 p.m., begin winding down. Avoid emotionally stimulating television, stressful conversations, or anything that keeps your nervous system in a heightened state. Dim the lights in your home. At 9:30 p.m., set your bedroom temperature to around 19 degrees Celsius and place a small glass of water on your nightstand. At 10 p.m., use the bathroom fully before lying down. Then, as you settle in, take 5 slow, deep breaths. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system and begins signaling the heart to slow into its nighttime rhythm. This routine costs nothing except intention, and the return on that investment is a cardiovascular system that spends the night repairing itself rather than fighting to survive. Your heart has been beating for you every minute of every day for 6, 7, or 8 decades. It has never asked for a day off. But it needs you to be deliberate about these nighttime hours, because what you do in the last 2 hours before sleep shapes what your heart and brain experience for the 8 hours that follow. The changes described here require no prescriptions and no expensive equipment. They require only attention.
If you read the first part of this series, you already know that what happens in the hours before sleep can determine whether your heart and brain survive the night. You learned about room temperature, dehydration, undiagnosed sleep apnea, medication timing, and late eating. You may have already started making changes. That matters more than you know. But there is more to the story. Because in my 3 decades of practice in internal medicine and geriatric health, I kept seeing patients who had corrected the obvious habits and still suffered overnight cardiac events. Patients who ate early, drank water, kept their rooms cool, and still woke up in emergency rooms. Or did not wake up at all. And when I looked closely at what those patients had in common, 5 more patterns kept appearing. Quieter than the first group, harder to detect, and in some ways more insidious, because they hide behind behaviors that feel healthy, responsible, even virtuous. This is part 2, and I want you to stay with me through every one of these, because the final habit on this list is one I have seen destroy hearts that had every reason to keep beating for another 20 years. What happens inside a sleeping body? Over 60 that most people never consider. Before we get into the habits, I want to give you one piece of context that will make everything else make sense. The cardiovascular system after age 60 operates with significantly less margin for error. Arteries that were once elastic and forgiving have become stiffer. The heart muscle itself has often thickened slightly from years of managing higher pressures. The electrical system that coordinates heartbeats has accumulated small inefficiencies over decades. The kidneys, which regulate fluid and blood pressure, work more slowly. The autonomic nervous system, which manages the transition between wakefulness and sleep, responds less quickly and less precisely than it did at 40. None of this is disease. All of it is aging. And all of it means that small disruptions, the kind a younger body would shrug off without noticing, can cascade into something serious in a body past 60. With that in mind, here are 5 more habits that are silently stacking the odds against you every night. Habit number 5. Sleeping on your back without knowing what it does to your heart. Most people have a preferred sleeping position and never think twice about it. Back sleeping, in particular, is often seen as neutral or even good for posture. But for adults over 60, and especially for anyone with any degree of heart enlargement, high blood pressure, or undetected sleep-disordered breathing, sleeping flat on the back is far from neutral. When you lie flat on your back, gravity causes the tongue and soft tissues of the throat to fall backward, partially narrowing the airway. This increases the likelihood and severity of breathing disruptions during sleep, even in people who have never been diagnosed with sleep apnea. Blood oxygen levels drop more during back sleeping episodes than during the same events in people sleeping on their sides. There is a second mechanism that receives almost no attention. In the supine position, the weight of the body changes the distribution of blood returning to the heart. For a healthy 35-year-old, this is inconsequential. For someone whose heart is already managing increased workload, the shift in venous return can elevate pressure inside the heart chambers during the hours when those chambers are supposed to be resting. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine found that cardiovascular stress markers were measurably higher in older adults who predominantly slept on their backs compared to those who slept on their sides, independent of other risk factors. The adjustment here requires no equipment and no expense. Train yourself to sleep on your left side. Placing a firm pillow behind your back can prevent you from rolling over during sleep. Left side sleeping improves circulation, reduces pressure on the heart, and keeps the airway more open throughout the night. Habit number 4. Using your phone or tablet in bed. I want to address this carefully, because the danger is not simply about the light from the screen, though that is real. The deeper danger is what the content does to your nervous system in the hour before sleep, and what that does to your heart overnight. When you scroll through news, social media, or emotionally activating content in bed, your sympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for the stress response, remains activated. Cortisol stays elevated. Adrenaline continues circulating. Your heart rate, which should be beginning its slow descent toward its protective nighttime rhythm, stays higher than it should. The body cannot simply switch off this activation the moment you put the phone down and close your eyes. Research from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine indicates that sympathetic nervous system arousal triggered by evening screen use can persist for 90 minutes or more after the device is set aside. That means your heart may be running at a stress-elevated rate well into the first hours of your sleep, hours that are critical for cardiovascular repair. For older adults, whose hearts already have less capacity to buffer against sustained elevated rates, this prolonged activation is not trivial. It keeps blood pressure elevated during a window when blood pressure is supposed to be dropping. It suppresses the release of growth hormone, which plays a direct role in cardiac tissue repair during deep sleep. And it shortens the duration of slow-wave sleep, the stage where the most significant cardiovascular restoration occurs. Put the phone in another room by 9 in the evening. Not on silent on the nightstand, in another room. The temptation to check it, even briefly, keeps a portion of your nervous system alert in a way that undermines everything your heart needs from sleep. Habit number 3. Drinking alcohol to help you fall asleep. This one is particularly important to address with honesty and without judgment, because the logic behind it feels so reasonable. Alcohol relaxes you. It helps you fall asleep faster. For millions of older adults, a glass of wine or a small drink before bed has been part of the evening routine for decades. It feels harmless. It may even feel like self-care. The cardiovascular reality is deeply at odds with that feeling. Alcohol is a vasodilator and a cardiac depressant. In the first hour or two after consumption, it does indeed lower heart rate and blood pressure and accelerate sleep onset. But as the body metabolizes alcohol in the second half of the night, a rebound effect occurs. The nervous system shifts sharply toward activation. Heart rate increases. Blood pressure rises. Sleep becomes fragmented. The body enters a state of physiological arousal during the exact hours when it most needs to be in deep, restorative rest. For adults over 60, this rebound has additional layers of danger. Alcohol interferes with the body's ability to regulate fluid balance overnight, compounding dehydration and thickening the blood. It relaxes the muscles of the throat and airway, dramatically worsening sleep apnea. It disrupts the precise timing of blood pressure medication, either blunting its effect or, in some combinations, amplifying it dangerously. Research published in the European Heart Journal found that even moderate alcohol consumption in the evening was associated with a significant increase in nighttime atrial fibrillation episodes in adults over 60. Atrial fibrillation is an irregular heart rhythm that dramatically raises the risk of stroke-causing clots. If alcohol is currently part of your evening routine, this is the conversation to have with your doctor. Not because a single glass is guaranteed to kill you, but because the cumulative cardiovascular cost of regular evening drinking in an older adult is far higher than most people have ever been told. Habit number 2. ignoring nighttime urination as a warning sign. Waking up once during the night to urinate is common and generally harmless in older adults. But waking up 2, 3, or 4 times every night is a pattern that most people dismiss as simply a consequence of aging. It is not. It is a signal, and in many cases it is pointing directly at a cardiovascular problem that is silently progressing. Here is the mechanism that almost no one explains. When the heart is not pumping efficiently during the day, fluid accumulates in the lower body, particularly in the legs and ankles. This is why some older adults notice swelling in their feet by late afternoon. When they lie down at night and the legs are elevated to the level of the heart, that accumulated fluid returns to circulation. The kidneys then process this sudden increase in circulating volume and produce more urine, causing repeated nighttime awakening. Frequent nighttime urination in this pattern is one of the early signs of cardiac insufficiency, a term for the heart beginning to struggle with its workload. It is also associated with poorly controlled hypertension, which causes the kidneys to work harder to filter excess sodium and fluid. Beyond the underlying cause, the nighttime awakenings themselves create cardiovascular stress. Each time you wake, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Blood pressure rises abruptly. If you stand up quickly, that sudden postural change can drop blood pressure dangerously fast in older adults, causing dizziness or falls. And repeated fragmentation of sleep prevents the sustained deep sleep stages that allow the cardiovascular system to repair. If you are waking more than once per night to urinate consistently, do not simply accept it as aging. Tell your doctor specifically how many times it happens, when it started, and whether you have noticed any ankle swelling during the day. This symptom deserves investigation, not resignation. Habit number 1. Chronic unmanaged evening stress. I saved this for last not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the most pervasive, the most underestimated, and in my experience, the habit that undermines every other protective measure a person puts in place. You can eat at 6:30. You can drink your water. You can set the thermostat to 19 degrees and lie down on your left side with no phone in the room. But if your mind is rehearsing the argument you had with your son, calculating unpaid bills, replaying a painful memory, or grinding through tomorrow's anxieties, your body does not know you are trying to rest. It responds to the perceived threat inside your mind the same way it would respond to a physical threat. Cortisol rises, adrenaline circulates, blood pressure climbs. The heart rate that should be dropping toward 55 or 60 beats per minute stays at 80 or higher. This sustained activation during the pre-sleep and early sleep window is not a minor inconvenience. A landmark study conducted over 12 years and published in the journal Circulation found that adults with high levels of chronic psychological stress had a 27% higher risk of fatal cardiovascular events, and the association was strongest during nighttime hours when stress hormones were preventing the normal cardiovascular recovery cycle. For older adults who are managing grief, financial uncertainty, chronic pain, isolation, or the accumulated weight of decades of difficult life experience, this is not simply a matter of choosing to relax. I understand that. Stress at this stage of life is often deeply real and deeply legitimate. But there are specific, evidence-based practices that interrupt the physiological stress response in the evening, even when the life circumstances causing the stress cannot be immediately resolved. Slow diaphragmatic breathing, where the exhale is longer than the inhale, directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system and measurably reduces cortisol within minutes. 5 to 10 minutes of this practice before bed is not a soft suggestion. It is a physiological intervention. Progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense and release muscle groups from the feet upward, has been shown in clinical trials to lower nighttime blood pressure in hypertensive older adults. writing down the 3 things weighing most heavily on your mind before you get into bed. Not to solve them, but simply to externalize them onto paper, reduces the cognitive activation that keeps the brain in problem-solving mode during the early sleep cycle. None of these practices requires medication, money, or special equipment. They require only consistency and the recognition that managing what happens in your mind in those final waking hours is not a luxury. It is cardiovascular medicine, a complete evening protocol for heart protection. When you combine the habits from Part 1 with those from this second list, a full protective evening takes shape. Eat your last meal by 6:30. Drink water at 8 and take your medications on schedule. Turn off screens by 9 and dim your lights. Set the room to 19 degrees Celsius. Spend 10 minutes doing slow breathing or progressive relaxation. Write down whatever is weighing on you. Drink a small glass of water and use the bathroom before lying down. Position yourself on your left side. Take 5 slow, deep breaths as you settle in, and let your exhale run longer than your inhale. This is not an elaborate ritual. It is a deliberate preparation of the body and mind for the most important biological process of the night, the cardiovascular repair cycle that determines how long and how well your heart continues to function. Your heart has survived everything life has thrown at it so far. It is beaten through loss and joy and fear and relief, without a single day off, without a moment of rest, for every year of your life. What it needs from you now is not extraordinary effort. It needs the small, consistent, intentional choices that allow it to do at night what it has always been designed to do. Start with one change tonight. Then add another. Within 30 days, the difference in how you feel in the morning will tell you everything you need to know about what was quietly happening before. This content is intended for general health education. Always speak with your personal physician before making any changes to medications, sleep practices, or health routines.